Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. A Good Samaritan in her early 30s died of asphyxiation after a fire broke out at a condominium in the National Capital Region in the wee hours of Monday. The interior designer saved many lives in a high-rise tower at Tulip Orange in Gurugram. Thanks to her, almost everyone escaped to safety, but unfortunately, she couldn't. A fire, accidental or otherwise, is likely to cause 12 times more deaths than injuries as per the NCRB data available in the country. The data shows 51 deaths are caused by fire every day. The data shows residential buildings are more likely to catch fire than factories manufacturing combustible items. Incidents at residential buildings account for 29% of the total number of fires caused. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze how safe are our high-rises. Joining me on the program today are Dr. G.C. Mishra, Director, Delhi Fire Services; Rajnish Aggarwal, National Chairman, Fire and Security Association of India and Partner, PDA Consultants; Professor K.T. Ravindran, Urban Planner and Senior Academic Advisor, RICS; and R.N. Gupta, former Vice President, Builders Association of India. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Dr. Mishra, I'd like to begin with you first. Basic question, how safe are our high-rises?
So, it's not a question of high-rise or low-rise. No building would ever be safe if you don't play safe in them. There are two issues. One is that how we design the building and then how do we live in those buildings. And also the important aspect is that our fire laws have come very late. And by the time much of the NCR was that was in existence. So now there are two kinds of building I would put in two regimes. One regime is the buildings that have come up without any fire protection norms. And second era or the second regime is where the buildings have been planned and designed and constructed in accordance with the National Building Code of India or the local laws. But still the problem is even the buildings that have been designed in two eras, they do have risk. And this risk multiplies with the kind of habits that we show in occupying those buildings. And it is not always the high-rise buildings. In Delhi, if I quote the statistics, now the total number of calls that we attend every year is about 30,000 calls plus. And out of which the high-rise fires are only less than 1%. So high-rise is not a worry. But if I see the maximum number of deaths, on an average about 400 people die every year in fire in Delhi, out of which 90% is linked with the low-rise residential buildings. So it is not the height of the building which plays an important role. It is the way they are constructed, the way we design their means of egress, the way we ventilate those buildings. So all these buildings are, they are inherently having the fire risk. And if we do not design the buildings to come out safely, then we are going to have these kind of accidents.
Indeed, design is one aspect of it. You spoke about risk. Now that's something that I want to take up with Rajnish Aggarwal. Now, is there a systemic check on these risks as such? I mean, and who's responsible for it? Who has to go and assess whether a building is at risk or not?
So, I would say that when we talk of high-rise, which is the topic of the day, the risks attached are manifold, higher than the normal buildings. There is no way that we can fight a fire externally in such buildings. So we have to place our design and equipments which can automatically take care of the fire, because there is hardly any chance that the occupants can come down and escape from such buildings. Such buildings also normally are having glass facades and they do not have natural ventilation or means of escape from open balconies. So when we start conceptualizing a building, there are many design parameters, there are many bodies like CTBUH or other agencies which write the norms on how safe these buildings should be. While conceptualizing, the developer who makes the building and the designer who designs the building, for example, I am a designer who works on the design of the building, how to make the building fire safe internally. We as a team, along with the architect, Architect plays an equally important role in designing the passive parameters and the egress ways out of the building. We three make a concept which is approved by the fire department of the country, of the various states, and guided by the National Building Code, NBC. We all as a team, but then at the end, it is also the user who has to get aware of the risks involved in living in such buildings. We in Delhi are not used to high-rise buildings, as Mr. Mishra correctly said. But when you see cities like Mumbai, where we are dependent on high-rise buildings today, people should be aware of the risks and provisions.
And it seems like that's going to be the trend going forward as well. You
Absolutely.
know, as more and more people come into cities, we are only going to see skyscrapers. A trend in the NCRB data that we have seen, KT Ravindran, is the fact that residential buildings seem far more susceptible to these fires. Why is that so?
I would say in most cases the residential buildings have got lesser standards of upkeep. Majority of the fires that we see, over 90% of the fires that we see, are caused by electrical systems. And in residential areas, there is a lot of abuse of the electrical systems. There's excessive loading. There is tacky construction techniques, low-grade materials which are used, and so on. And these cause fires. And in the case of many of the larger building groups, or in the case of larger factories and other places, the systems are maintained more carefully than they are in the residential areas. So this is one reason why there is much more casualties in the residential functions. But in the case of multi-story buildings, like for instance what happened yesterday in Gurgaon, the fire broke out on the ground floor. So there was no possibility of ingress for people who were living in that zone. They ran upwards for safety. And of course, the building had not sufficient systems for escape. And I think the nearest fire station was quite 10-12 kilometers away. So there is all these issues of like larger planning issues where you distribute fire stations in such a way that it can take care of specific areas. This is not being looked after in the case of Gurgaon at all.
So better planning on the whole is going to ensure we go a long way as far as dealing with this problem is concerned, is what you're suggesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Rajnish.
I would like to add that residential buildings pose a higher risk because of a couple of more reasons. Number one, the people who live in, they range from various age groups, children as well as elderly, who may not be as attentive or capable of escaping. Number two, we have a large number of kitchens as against commercial buildings, and every kitchen is a possible threat or a starting point for a fire. So that is the second reason. The third is people sleep in these buildings, and any fire which is caused at the time when most of the people are sleeping can cause many more fatalities as compared to an office building where more or less people are always attentive.
Right, right. All right, let me go across to R.N. Gupta now, who's been patiently listening in on the debate. You know, as far as this particular problem itself is concerned, what's the best way forward, do you think? How do we deal with this problem as such?
We follow all the rules during construction, but after there is no maintenance, after no recheck after during maintenance of the buildings. NOC has been got from the fire department after construction, but no the NOC got from after maintenance. So such type of accidents occurred if do not follow the rules.
Okay. So rules are not being followed, and that's why these
during the maintenance.
Yeah, during the maintenance. So the builder has done his part, is what you're suggesting, and it's because the residents and the maintenance of the buildings are not kept up. That's why these incidents take place, is what you're suggesting. Okay, moving on and taking the discussion forward, GC Mishra, you know, what do you do in the eventuality that you're in the midst of a fire like this? There should be an SOP that needs to be followed. What is it that needs to be done?
Yes, there is a SOP, and that is called the fire drill orders for the buildings that are above 15 meters in height in Delhi. But that is not the case throughout the country. Now, having the, say, SOP on the fire drills, that does not necessarily mean that you are going to be safe. Now, what is more important, as rightly he has pointed out, that we divide the buildings into two categories. One, that buildings having the sleeping risk and the buildings where we work. Now, the difference between the two is that in the former case, there is always a possibility of delayed detection. And in second case, people are say working and they know if they sense the presence of fire, they have enough time to escape. But when you are fast asleep, whether in hotel or in a residential building or in a hospital, then depending upon your mobility impairment, it depends then how fast you can come out of the building. Now, in all the cases, but if we look at the National Building Code of India, what is unfortunately done in the National Building Code is that up to 60 meters of the building height, residential building other than hotels, there is no requirement concerning the automatic detection and alarming device. Now, the lady who lost her life in this Gurgaon incident, and also there was an incident in Mumbai,
Yes.
where a girl saved many lives and she could come out safely. And then also that time I commented, every time you may not be that lucky. So whether to attempt such a social kind of responsibility that we tend to show or not. Now, even the fire professionals, they get trapped. Say fire behaves in such a way in high-rise buildings because of the stack effect that you do not know which way the smoke is going to move.
But that doesn't mean that if you're in a position to help, that you don't help.
No, I have my reservations on this issue. Say, helping to what extent? Now, taking undue risk is not, to me, is very wise.
But what do you do? What do you do, Dr. Mishra, when a fire engine is 45 minutes away?
Say, that is why these buildings are designed and constructed to have the inbuilt arrangements. So, your dependency on the local fire service is less. So, now if the building does not have the detection system, it does not have the fire protection arrangements, then you are totally dependent on the fire brigade. Now, if I have designed...
So, you're suggesting that we should have a system in place
Yes.
where it should not reach this particular stage at all.
At all.
Okay.
And the means of egress, in most of the buildings, the means of egress have not been protected. Now, Delhi also, we had several incidents where the low-rise buildings having the stilt floor, the fire started from the stilt area and there was an open staircase in between, centrally located. Now, that is the only place smoke and hot gases, everything is going to move up and people could not come down. So, traveling to the terrace is also a very risky proposition.
Right. Okay. Points taken. I'm going to take up the topic that you've taken, or the issue that you raised with Rajnish in just a bit. But before that, I want to go back to the point that Mr. Gupta was making, Professor, about, where does the builders or the constructors' responsibility end?
Well, in normal practices, in construction management practices, the builder's responsibility ends with getting the sanction of the building, especially for fire safety and so on. And then there is a gestation period, depending on the nature of the contract, in which he or that company is responsible for its maintenance. Now, beyond that, the maintenance system and proper drills are taught to the people who occupy the building. And then the fire department...
But does that actually happen? Because I've been in Delhi for 6
Yes,
years
it
now,
does.
and I've lived in high rises all through the 6 years that I've been here. Not once have I seen a fire drill.
No, but there are fire drills which are conducted. I know this for a fact because I do design public buildings. And what the fire department in Delhi does is remarkable. They do come on and off during a certain period of time. They come and check your system and they ensure that everything is in place. And you have to check the hooters, you have to check if the systems are functioning, you have to check if your precautions are in place. All that is checked. Usually because of the users violate many of these or they slacken on the upkeep and maintenance, that they are unable to contain the fire. But loss of life is due to other reasons. One thing, like he pointed out, it may be if it's a residential area, it breaks out in the night and the people are asleep. But in a hotel or even in residential buildings, we have a lot of use of plastics and PVC carpets and so on, which are highly toxic once they catch fire. And due to the high toxicity, there is generation of smoke and toxic smoke, and people faint in that smoke. And those who faint have no way to escape. They die. This is what happens in many of the high-rise hotels, where people die because of the toxic fumes spread. Like he said, because of the stack effect, the hot air just rises up, the gases just rise up through either the lift shaft or the staircase. These are the two vertical systems which connect all the floors. And those are the only places from where we can exit. So either there has to be there is a fire code exists where we should have escape locations, we should have balconies, we should have external staircases. There are many.
How seriously is this followed?
This is as far as buildings above 15 meters are concerned, in Delhi it's followed very seriously. And to my knowledge, I have been in practice in Delhi for many years, and while I was chairing the Delhi Urban Art Commission also, we had the Chief Fire Officer sitting with us in the commission as an expert member when we were clearing large buildings.
Right.
So the Delhi Fire Service takes it very seriously. You may recall the things like the Ubhar tragedy, where what they did were heroic.
No, there's no doubt about that.
So they are very vigilant.
We don't question the fire personnel at all. They are brave hearts at the end of the day and do their work to the hilt.
I am not saying that you are questioning them. I am saying that there is say for instance, Delhi has got nearly 20 million people. Okay, and we have 36 or 38. How many, Mr. Mishra, fire stations do we have in
We have
Delhi?
67. Sir.
67. Is it?
Yeah.
All right. 2 years back, the statistics said it was only 36. So
right.
That's why I was quoting from 2016. And I think you have about 2,000 people working in the fire service.
3,800.
3,800.
So that figure too
the
has
numbers
doubled.
have gone.
Yes,
yeah.
the numbers have gone
but
up.
But that's not the case in Noida or in Gurgaon, where most of the tall buildings are coming up. There are not sufficient density of fire stations or fire personnel per capita population.
Sure, right.
And that's a serious concern even today. Bombay is the same case.
Right. Rajnish Aggarwal, what do we do in the case of a fire? Because, yeah, you see the fire extinguishers, you see break the glass, you see everything else, but you don't really know what to do with it.
Yes, that is where FSAI comes in, Fire and Security Association of India. We conduct almost 150 events every year. This year we are planning to conduct 250 events, ranging from mass awareness campaigns like we are doing a marathon in Pune now on 10th of March, where the Puneites are going to run for spreading the awareness on fire. We are doing programs in schools where we are teaching 10 lakh students every year what to do in case of fire. Recently we had a beautiful act by a small 8-year-old girl who saved 14 lives in Mumbai. 8-year-old girl saved 14 lives simply by knowing what to do. Many of us during our childhood were never told how to operate a fire extinguisher, and probably we don't even know now. We don't even have fire extinguishers in our home. We are appealing to the people around us, to the community, that instead of giving sweets this Diwali, we should give away fire extinguishers, which should be kept in every household. We want to create a Surakshit Bharat, where every person is responsible for his own life. Fire can be easily defeated if you know what to do in case of fire, what are the norms, where should you run, what you should do. You should keep a wet towel handy, which you should keep on your mouth while trying to escape. You should try not to go inside but outside of the building, to race down out of the building as soon as possible, or to get into a protected space where now in our buildings, as a designer, we have fire compartmentation, which means the building is converted into many compartments where the fire can be stopped in between the compartments for over 2 hours. So we should know the layout of the building where we live or sleep, so that we can run to the safe zone as soon as the fire. So that is where we try to educate the community, and we are appealing to the community to learn and take fire seriously, because fire is very sensitive.
One problem or one issue that you need to deal with is panic, because the moment you see smoke, the moment you see a fire, people tend to panic. Now, how do you stay calm in a situation like that? And also, I've heard that in the incidents of a fire, you lay flat on the ground so that the smoke can rise up.
You're absolutely right. See, fire definitely creates panic. That is where the regular fire drills help. Like Mr. Mishra said, in corporates and in working places, there is a large trend in hotels. We see fire drills happening. The same have to, as you said, you have not seen in residential spaces. We feel that we should have regular fire drills and education. This will reduce the panic. When people know that in case of a fire, I can still save myself and others, that is where the panic will go away. And we can teach people how to combat fire. Everybody amongst us is a fireman, provided we know. It's not only the responsibility of the fire department, they are there only to help us as a backup. The first reaction has to come from the people.
All right, the first reaction has to come from the people is what you're suggesting. Arun Gupta, what needs to be done or what is done during the construction of a building so as to ensure that, you know, such incidents don't take place? What measures and what precautions are taken at the initial stage itself?
Sir, we are taking a very precautions and skilled laborers during the construction. There is a prescribed time in our agreement, contract, okay, either a maintenance period is 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. We maintain the building that period, but after my handing over of the building, though no NOC and no any skilled labor are maintained by the maintenance department.
Okay.
Residents are not known regarding the operating of the system of the fire alarm and fire emptying.
All right. So that is the problem, is what you're suggesting, because there is no one who is skilled there to ensure that they carry out the evacuation or you know, anything else that happens during the fire itself. Skilled personnel, the lack of skilled personnel is what the problem is what you're suggesting. Okay, closing comments now from all my guests, starting with you first, GC Mishra, on what needs to be done going forward so as to ensure that no such incidents take place.
We need to value our own life first. Now, what happens? Say, we are not that serious towards our own safety. And during the fire service week, we, on the request of the RWAs, we go and conduct the fire drills and also give them lecture, demonstration of the equipment that are installed in the premises. And you will be surprised to know it becomes difficult to even gather 10 persons there. Now, to the extent, now people come to their balcony after repeated requests and they say, you do, we are watching. Now, this is like you jump into water and you know how to swim. But that doesn't work. So, we have to be participative in all these activities, which unfortunately is a very, very low percent in Delhi, especially in the residential buildings. Now, second thing is it costs you money. Now, say in Delhi, we have a requirement of renewal of NOC after every 5 years. Earlier, it was once in lifetime. Now, after every 5 years, you have to renew your NOC. And each year, you have to submit a declaration sorry, that all the systems are in place and they are in operable conditions. Second problem that we have faced in Delhi is the changes in the premises after the building has been handed over. Now, when we go for the renewal of the NOC, we find that many changes have been made in the building without taking into consideration the required changes in the fire protection arrangement. Now, most of the detectors are hidden, the sprinkler systems are concealed. Even you will see that the sprinkler head is concealed within the POP that they provide after the occupancy, the kind of furniture they use. So, all these things over the years, now you keep on adding electrical loads. You don't get the electrical load ever measured. You know, the requirements have changed. I should get my circuit upgraded, but that is never done.
Right.
So, these are the issues where we have to be concerned about, and also we must take a very conscious decision on this issue.
Right.
Look, this is for my safety and I'll pay for it.
All right. KT Ravindran, what needs to be done at the planning stage itself?
I think the most important thing that needs to be done is that, as he said, we have to take our own lives more seriously. And the regulations have to look at these lives more seriously. Now, Delhi has got one of the most effective functioning fire service. Many other cities don't have it, including Bombay does not have a sufficiently efficient service. And leave alone the small town, third tier towns and fourth tier towns and so on, where now real estate is moving. Now, those areas have even lesser methods of protection. So, I think at national level there has to be, we need to revisit the rules and regulations, and we have to ensure that unless the firefighting system is available, there should be no sanction for high-rise buildings. Let's clamp it down. Then you will see how very quickly they will respond to it. Now, as in Delhi, there was also a proposal to collect some extra fire service tax at one time. I don't think that was put in place. But we need to generate more income from various methods like taxation to provide better service at better density of and distribution of fire services. That is not happened as yet in the country because we are not taking this sector seriously.
Sure. All right.
This is where I think the next move should be towards that.
Rajnish Aggarwal, the real estate sector is not doing too well at the moment. We could see a lot of, cutting some corners as far as the builders themselves are concerned. Does this mean that there are troubled days ahead for us?
I would say that today the awareness levels are pretty high. The market may be low, but then people are more aware of yesterday. The designers are designing buildings much better. The fire department has become much more strict and the compliances are happening. Moreover, because the market is tough, the real estate developers are much more concerned about their brands and their perception in the market. I would say I don't see a threat ahead. I only see that the things are getting day by day better. The only thing we need to do now is to sensitize the people so that people know and check the safety of the building before they buy, so that they don't buy a wrong product, which can be a life-taking product.
That having been said, would you submit then older buildings are far more susceptible than the newer buildings?
I would say that, and we need to modernize them. And I think the competition today automatically is forcing them to reinstate those buildings and refurbish those buildings. And if the awareness amongst the buyers is there, I don't see a reason why they will not be compelled to be refurbished before they are.
All right. Arun Gupta, I'm coming to you, Dr. Mishra. Before that, let me get into a closing comment from Arun Gupta as well. What more needs to be done, do you believe, going forward, Mr. Gupta?
Some high-rise buildings are very safe, but due to the poor maintenance and the higher fire brigade is not available in India, the fire system is failure at that time. Or fire also travel through the HVAC duct also, which arises in the whole building.
Okay, all right. Dr. Mishra, close the show for us.
Yes. Now, one thing I would add to what Mr. Aggarwal has said. Now, the problem today is that ceiling height is going down. And also the natural venting. If you say we do not get calls from the old Delhi in residential buildings. They are open buildings and ceiling height is very good, 4.5 meters even. And there it takes time for the smoke to fill up and descend to the layer that affects your life.
Right.
But if you look at the new buildings, especially the high rise, now the ceiling height has gone down to 8 feet. Now the time required to fill up the smoke to your knee level
is far lesser.
Hardly 1.5 minutes.
Yes. So good ventilation is key, is what you're suggesting. All right. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.